The winter wind howled across the Wyoming plains, driving snow horizontally against the weathered siding of the Thorne Ranch. Jared Thorne dropped from his horse, his boot sinking into the frozen mud. He adjusted the gun belt hanging low on his hips, the leather worn smooth from years of quick draws and long rides. He had been gone 3 years, chasing bounties and running from ghosts, only to return to a home that should have been empty. Instead, smoke curled from the chimney, snatched away by the blizzard. Jared's hand hovered over the Colt on his hip. He didn't remember inviting guests. He mounted the steps, the wood groaning under his weight, and kicked the door open. The warmth hit him first, smelling of wood smoke and something unfamiliar, spices, ginger, and rice. A woman stood by the hearth. She froze, a cast-iron skillet in her hand. She wasn't the squatter he expected. She was Chinese, wearing a tattered, high-collared cheongsam that had once been fine silk but was now dull and patched. A fraying red scarf was wrapped tightly around her neck against the draft. Behind her, heads popped up from behind the sofa and the table. Jared counted them. 1, 2, 3. 8 children. They were a mix of ages, their features a blend of the woman's sharp elegance and something undeniably Western. They wore oversized, tattered shirts and trousers, clearly scavenged and sewn back together. "Who are you?" Jared's voice was gravel, unused to casual conversation. "And why are you in my brother's house?" The woman set the skillet down slowly, moving with deliberate calm despite the fear in her eyes. She ushered the children back. "My name is Mai Lin," she said, her English accented but clear. "And this was Arthur's home." "Arthur is dead," Jared said, the grief still a dull ache in his chest. "I buried him before I left. This land is mine." "I know," Mai Lin said softly. She reached into the folds of her dress and pulled out a worn envelope. "He told me you might come back. He said if you did, I was to give you this." Jared took the letter. He didn't look at it. He looked at the children. 8 pairs of dark, terrified eyes stared back. "Get out," he said. Mai Lin didn't flinch. "It is a blizzard, Mr. Thorne. The children will freeze. Not my problem." Mai Lin looked down at the smallest child, a girl clutching her leg, then back at the gunslinger. Her shoulders slumped, the fight draining out of her. "We have nowhere to go," she whispered, the sound barely audible over the wind. "But we will leave if you want." She began to herd the children toward the door. The smallest boy was shivering violently, his boots merely rags wrapped around his feet. Jared watched them move. He looked at the snow piling up against the window pane, white death waiting outside. He cursed under his breath, a harsh sound in the quiet room. "Wait," Jared barked. Mai Lin stopped, her hand on the latch. "The barn," Jared said, pointing a gloved finger. "It's dry. There's hay. You stay there tonight. Tomorrow, we sort this out." Mai Lin nodded, a flicker of relief crossing her face. "Thank you." Jared watched them trudge out into the snow, 8 small shadows and one woman in a red scarf, disappearing into the white. He slammed the door and walked to the fireplace. He opened the envelope. Inside was a marriage certificate, dated 10 years ago. Arthur Thorne and Mai Lin. And birth certificates for 8 children. Jared sat heavily in his brother's chair. Arthur, the quiet one, the one who stayed behind to farm while Jared went off to shoot men for money, had lived an entire secret life. He had married a Chinese woman in a time and place where such things could get you killed, and he had raised 8 children in the shadow of this ranch. The next morning, the snow had stopped, leaving the world a blinding white sheet. Jared woke before dawn, habit waking him, but the ranch was already alive. He looked out the window to see the older boys, their black hair dusted with snow, breaking ice in the water trough for the cattle. The girls were carrying firewood, stacking it neatly against the porch. Jared walked out, coffee in hand. Mai Lin was in the barn doorway, sweeping. "They work hard," Jared said, approaching her. "They know that work is survival," Mai Lin replied. She didn't stop sweeping. Did you read the papers? I did. Why didn't he tell me? Mylin stopped then. She looked at the horizon. Because he loved you, and he feared for us. He knew the law. He knew the neighbors. He wanted to protect his family. She turned her gaze to Jared. He said you were a dangerous man, Jared. But he also said you were a man of honor. Jared grunted. Honor doesn't feed 8 mouths. No, Mylin agreed. Work does. We will earn our keep until the weather clears. Then we will go. Jared watched the boys struggling with a heavy hay bale. Without a word, he walked over, lifted the bale with one hand, and tossed it into the feeder. Come inside, he said to the boys. Breakfast. The kitchen was crowded. Jared sat at the head of the table, feeling like an intruder in his own home. Mylin served a porridge made of rice and water, kanji, she called it, along with the bacon Jared had fried. The children ate with a hunger that spoke of months of rationing. What's your name? Jared asked the oldest boy, who looked to be about 14. Kanai, the boy said, not looking up. Kanai Thorn. Thorn. The name hung in the air. And you? He asked the girl next to him. Iona. Jared nodded. He finished his coffee. If you're staying, we need supplies. The storm's passed. I'm going to town. We have no money for supplies, Mylin said quietly. Jared stood up, his spurs clinking. I didn't ask for money. The town of Oak Haven was buried under 2 feet of snow. Jared rode his black stallion down the main street, feeling the eyes of the townsfolk. He tied his horse at the general store and stepped inside. The shopkeeper, a balding man named Henderson, grew pale. Jared Thorn. Thought you were dead. Disappointed? Jared asked, tossing a list on the counter. Fill it. And I need boots. 8 pairs, various sizes. Winter coats, too. Henderson raised an eyebrow. Starting an orphanage out there, Jared. None of your business. As Henderson gathered the supplies, the bell above the door chimed. A man walked in, flanked by 2 hired guns. He was dressed in a pristine wool coat with a fur collar. Darius Holt. The man who owned half the county and wanted the other half. Well, Holt sneered, his voice smooth as oil. The prodigal gunslinger returns. I heard Arthur passed. Shame. He was a stubborn man. Holt, Jared acknowledged with a nod. I assume you're here to sell, Holt said, stepping closer. I made Arthur an offer before he died. I'll make you the same one. Fair price for the land. You can take your money and go back to whatever hole you crawled out of. Not selling, Jared said. Holt's eyes narrowed. You have no one to run that place, Jared. It's a wasteland. And I hear rumors. Rumors that Arthur left behind a mess. Squatters. Jared turned slowly to face him. They aren't squatters. They're family. Holt laughed, a cold, sharp sound. Family? The Chinawoman and her brood? Arthur's shame is what they are. It's an abomination, Thorn. The whole town thinks so. You think you can play house with them and keep your standing? Jared's hand twitched near his holster. The 2 men behind Holt tensed. Careful, Holt. You know who I am. I know you're one man, Holt said, his smile vanishing. And winter is long. Accidents happen. Jared paid for his supplies and rode back to the ranch, his jaw set tight. When he arrived, the children were waiting on the porch. He tossed the bundle of boots and coats to them. It was like Christmas. The joy on their faces as they pulled on boots that didn't have holes was something Jared hadn't expected to feel. Mylin stood in the doorway, watching him. You bought them clothes. Can't have them freezing, Jared muttered. Holt was in town. He knows you're here. My Lin's face paled. He threatened Arthur many times. He wants the water rights on the South Ridge. He's not getting them, Jared said. But he's right about one thing. I can't run this place alone. And you can't run it without protection. He looked at her, really looked at her. She was thin, exhausted, but her eyes held a steel that reminded him of the toughest men he'd ridden with. We make a deal, Jared said. You and the kids run the house, help with the stock. I handle Holt and the heavy work. We split the profits. You stay in the house. No more sleeping in the barn. My Lin studied him. Why? Because Arthur was my brother, Jared said. And I wasn't there when he needed me. I won't fail him again. The weeks passed, falling into a rhythm. Jared taught the older boys, Kanai and Jory, how to mend fences and shoot a rifle. My Lin taught Jared how to make dumplings and how to listen. The house, once cold and silent, was now filled with noise, laughter, arguments, the thumping of feet. Jared found himself softening. He let the youngest girl, barely 4, braid his hair while he sat by the fire. He listened to My Lin sing lullabies in a language he didn't understand but felt in his bones. But the winter peace was fragile. One evening, a rock shattered the front window. Attached was a note, "Get the filth out, or we burn you out." Jared stood on the porch, rifle in hand, staring into the darkness. My Lin came out, wrapping her red scarf tight. "He won't stop," she said. "Neither will I," Jared replied. 2 nights later, the barn went up in flames. Jared woke to the smell of smoke and the screaming of horses. He ran out, half-dressed, into the snow. Kanai and Jory were already there, throwing buckets of snow and water on the flames. They managed to save the animals, but the structure was gutted. Jared stood in the ashes, his rage a cold, hard knot in his stomach. He turned to saddle his horse. "Where are you going?" My Lin grabbed his horse's reins. "To kill him," Jared said. "It ends tonight." "No," My Lin said firmly. "If you kill him, the law hangs you. Then what happens to the children? Who protects them then? He burned my barn, My Lin. And he wants you to react," she snapped. "He wants you to be the violent gunslinger so he can justify killing you. We fight him, yes. But we do it smart." Jared looked down at her. "How?" "We have Arthur's journals," she said. "He wrote everything down. Every threat, every bribe Holt offered the sheriff, every stolen acre. Arthur was building a case. He just didn't live long enough to present it." The next morning, Jared and My Lin rode into town, not to the saloon, but to the courthouse. They found Judge Morrison, a man known for being cranky but honest. "This is quite a file," Morrison said, adjusting his spectacles as he read Arthur's detailed notes. "But without a witness to confirm the intimidation, it's just the writings of a dead man." "I am the witness," My Lin said, stepping forward. Morrison looked at her kindly but sadly. "Mrs. Thorne, a jury in this territory, they might not take the word of a Chinese woman over a man like Darius Holt." "They will if there's another witness," a voice croaked from the doorway. An old woman stood there, leaning on a cane. It was Widow Higgins, who lived on the edge of town. "Holt burned my husband's workshop 10 years ago to get our land," she said. "I was too scared to speak up. But I saw what he did to the Thorne Ranch last night. I'm done being scared." The trial was set for the following week. Holt was furious. He stalked the town like a caged tiger. The night before the hearing, Jared sat on the porch, cleaning his colt. "He'll come tonight," Jared said. "He knows if he gets to court, he loses." My Lin nodded. She had sent the younger children into the cellar. Kanai and Jory were positioned at the back windows with shark guns. "We are ready." They came at midnight. 6 riders, torches blazing. "Burn it all!" Holt's voice screamed from the dark. The first shot rang out, shattering the silence. Jared dropped a rider from 50 yards away. The gunfire erupted. Bullets chewed into the wood of the house. Jared moved with the fluid grace of a man who had lived by the gun. He fired, moved, fired again. Mylin wasn't hiding. She was reloading for him, her hand steady. "Back door!" Jared shouted. Kenai fired the shotgun, the blast knocking a man off the porch. The boy was shaking, but he held his ground. Holt himself rode toward the porch, aiming a torch at the dry wood of the main house. Jared stepped out, exposing himself. "Holt!" Jared roared. Holt turned, raising his pistol. But he was a businessman, not a gunman. Jared's bullet took him in the shoulder, knocking him from his saddle. The torch fell harmlessly into the snow. The hired guns, seeing their boss fall, scattered into the night. Jared walked down the steps, his gun trained on Holt, who was writhing in the snow. "Finish it," Holt gasped, clutching his bleeding shoulder. Jared looked at the man, then back at the house. Mylin stood on the porch, the red scarf bright against the gloom. The children were safe. "No," Jared said. "You're going to prison. And you're going to watch us live on this land from behind bars." The trial was a sensation. With Arthur's journals, Widow Higgins' testimony, and the failed attack on the ranch, Holt's empire crumbled. He was sentenced to 20 years in the territorial prison. Spring came to the ranch, melting the snow and revealing the rich, black earth beneath. The grass turned a vibrant green. Jared stood by the repaired fence, watching the cattle graze. He felt a hand on his arm. Mylin stood beside him, no longer wearing the tattered cheongsam, but a simple blue dress she had sewn herself. "The daffodils Arthur planted are blooming," she said. "Good," Jared said. "We need to plant more corn this year. Kenai wants to try a new irrigation ditch." "Kenai thinks he is the boss now," Mylin laughed. "He learned from his mother," Jared smiled. It was a real smile, one that reached his eyes. He turned to face her. "Mylin." "Yes, Jared." "I was thinking," he started, rubbing the back of his neck. "This partnership. It works." "It does. But I don't want to be just partners anymore." Mylin's eyes softened. She reached up and adjusted his collar. "Took you long enough to say it, Gunslinger. I'm a slow learner." "We are not leaving," she whispered, echoing her words from that first snowy night, but with a different meaning now. "No," Jared said, pulling her close. "You're home." They were married a month later, under the great oak tree by the creek. It was a scandal to some in town, but Jared Thorne didn't care. He had 8 children, a ranch that was thriving, and a woman who had saved him just as much as he had saved her. Years later, travelers passing through Wyoming would tell stories of the Thorne Ranch. They spoke of the finest cattle in the territory, of a sprawling house filled with children of all backgrounds, and of the old man and woman who sat on the porch every evening. He, cleaning an old Colt Peacemaker that was never fired anymore, she, wearing a faded red scarf, her hand resting gently in his. The gunslinger had come home to a stranger's children, and in doing so, he had found the one thing he never thought he'd have, a legacy.